Hello, this is Dr. Ben, and welcome back to Mythology 201. For this discussion, we're going to be talking about the Titans, and more generally, we're going to be discussing the beginning of the world. So, how the world itself, which is Gaia, emerges from chaos, and we start to see these primordial beings enter into this space where nothing was there before. So we're going to begin by discussing Hesiod. Hesiod, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, is one of our oldest Greek poets who's writing sometime around 700 BC. So he follows slightly behind Homer in his writing. He was a shepherd who tended sheep close to Mount Helicon. And we know from other sources that he was a revered poet and singer of epic because he once won a contest and was given a tripod for winning that contest. He writes two major works, the Theogony, which deals with the origins and genealogies of the gods and the events that lead up to basically Zeus. So we have everything that takes place before the Zeus, and then Zeus, and then the works and days, the Erga Kai Heria. Sorry, Emeria, which in large part sort of discusses the creation of men, and sort of its interactions with the gods. So the Theogony begins very differently than Homer's Iliad or Odyssey began, which we'll discuss later here in the semester. But it begins from the muses of Helicon. Let us begin our singing that haunt Helicon's great and holy mountain and dance on their soft feet around a violet dark spring and the altar of mighty sun Knonos. And he says, in truth, first of all, chasm or chaos came to be, and then broad-breasted earth, Gaia, the ever immovable seat of all the immortals who possess snowy Olympus's peak and Mercury Tartarus in the depths of the broad path earth, and Eros, who is the most beautiful among the immortal gods, the limb melter. He overpowers the mind and the thoughtful counsels of all the gods and of all human beings in their breasts. From chasm, Erebos and black night came to be, and then ether and day came forth from night, who conceived and bore them after mingling in love with Erebos. So what we have here is the creation of just the stuff that the earth is made of. We need the earth. We need night. We need day. We need the air that we breathe, the depths of the earth, all these things. And so these are the first creation. And if we think about other creation stories, specifically these things like the Judeo-Christian creation story, what does it talk about? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the light and the dark. So we have sort of the separation of this stuff into a specific function within this physical realm that's starting to exist from nothing. Out of this, we have Gaia and then Uranos, which is the sky. earth first brings forth starry sky, Uranus, equal to herself, to cover her on every side. And this is something we're going to see. The earth, Gaia, creates most of these early primordial deities and specifically the Titans, which we're going to get to. So she would be forevermore a movable seat from the blessed gods, and she bore the high mountains, the graceful haunts of the goddesses, nymphs who dwell in wooded mountains, and she also bore the barren sea seething in its swell. So she creates a sun, Uranus, the sky, who rests on top of her, Gaia, the earth. This is the first example of something that we have in mythology called a hieros gamos. And this is a term that you should become familiar with. We're going to talk about this several times, especially in this first part of the semester when we talk about gods and goddesses. This is basically translates as a sacred or holy marriage. And Gaia and Uranus represent the first of these. Usually what you have for this hieros gamos to take place, some sort of sky god and some sort of fertility goddess essentially being, married might not be the best term, but married. And it's about that union that they create. We'll discuss this again, of course, with Zeus and Hera, but we'll see other examples of it also throughout, like I said, the beginning of this semester. An important concept to understand is how even these primordial beings and these titans and these gods and goddesses are represented. As we see here, we have this painting of Gaia and Uranus. They look like a man. Uranus looks like a man. Here we have Gaia from one of my favorite cartoons as a kid, Captain Planet. The representation of Gaia is typically as a woman. And this is called anthropomorphism, another important term to understand. An early Greek philosopher explains this when he said, his name is Xenophanes of Colophon. He says, but if cattle and horses and lions had hands or could paint with their hands and create works such as men do, horses and cattle like cattle would also depict the gods' shapes and make their bodies of such a sort as the form they themselves have. Ethiopians say their gods are snub-nosed and black. Thracians, they are pale and red-haired. What Xenophanes is getting at is that people tend to depict deity similar to how they look. And so the Greeks start to paint and start to depict these beings. Zeus is the physical manifestation of lightning, but yet he has this human form. Uranus is literally the sky, the blue sky above the earth, but we have him depicted as a man, not as a sky. From this hieros gamos, Uranus and Gaia begin to have children, and these children are what are known as the Titans. They also have other children, the Cyclopes, Brontes, Stereopes, and Arges, literally thunder, lightning, and bright, Arges is my favorite. Bright. And the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, Codus, Briareus, and Gyes. These Cyclopes are not to be confused with Polyphemus, who we see later in the Odyssey. If you haven't read the Odyssey, these are more primordial beings. They are the smiths who work with Hephaestus to pound out the armor of the gods and the goddesses. They create the thunder bolts that Zeus throws. Right? Brontis and Stereopes, thunder and lightning, and bright. When you think bright, think, when lightning and thunder, during a lightning and thunderstorm, when lightning hits and just everything goes light. That's what Arges is. And the Hecatoncheires, these are going to take part later in a revolt against Zeus once he overthrows the Titans. So who are the Titans? We have Oceanus, ocean, right? Coeus, Creus, Hyperion, the sun, Iapetus, mortality, Thea, Rhea, Themis, justice, Mnemosyne, memory, Phoebe, the moon, Tethys, and Kronos, the sky. The Titans, just like the primordial beings, start to marry one another and start to have children. And it's from, of course, one of these heroi gamoi, that the Olympians are created, but we're going to get to that. So some of these heroi gamoi that we have, the first is Oceanus and Tethys. They produce numerous children, the Oceanids. They had 3,000 sons and daughters. So if you think, these represent all of the rivers and waters and springs of the world. And if you think about it, I mean, in a sense, of course, from the oceans oceans interact with these rivers that empty into the ocean. And so, and most of these waterways are connected in some way, shape, or form, these little branches off. And all of these are represented by the children of Oceanus and Tethys. Hyperion, Thea. Hyperion, the god of the sun, the physical manifestation of the sun, with their children Helios, Selene, and Eos. Helios, who comes to also represent the sun. We're told that Helios has numerous lovers. These are recounted by Ovid, who we'll mention over the course of this semester. He's a Roman author whose work, The Metamorphoses, tells us relates a lot of these myths to the Romans. Helios is especially important because he's worshipped on the island of Rhodes. They build a statue to Helios known as the Colossus of Rhodes. This statue, which stood at the entrance to their port, was one of the wonders of the seven wonders of the ancient world. And as you'll see, we'll talk about these seven wonders of the ancient world, but all of the Greek wonders of the ancient world are things that pay homage to gods and goddesses. Here we have a computer-generated representation. This, of course, falls down after an earthquake. You don't really know much of what it looks like. But it worked sort of as a lighthouse guiding ships into the harbor. And so where Helios is set to drive the chariot of Hyperion after he sort of takes over. And I should mention, this is something we're going to see, is new generations constantly taking over for old generations. But as Helios is meant to be a physical representation of the sun, this statue holding its lamp guided people, and it showed its light and guided people into the harbor. Selene, the moon. Well, there's this thing that gives off light at night. Selene, who drives a chariot, where Helios drives his 4-horse chariot, Selene drives the chariot of 2 horses. I should mention, because I want to actually get into this, when you see representations of Helios and Hyperion, we have this crown with the light beams coming off of them. Selene is represented with this crescent moon over her head. Much like the other beings of her generation, she does fall in love with a human, Endymion, who's given perpetual sleep and youth, so she can look at him all day. And he never gets old. Last, we have Eos, who's the goddess of dawn. Often we see her depicted with wings, but she does drive a 2-horse chariot. She also has a lover who she gives immortality to, but forgets to give him perpetual youth. He actually turns into a cricket. He sort of gets that Benjamin Button thing where he just keeps getting older and older and smaller and smaller. And he eventually turns into a cricket. So Uranus, afraid of the younger generation, attempts to prevent them from escaping from Gaia's womb. As Hesiod reports, literally Uranus stays on top of Gaia, preventing her from bearing these children. Gaia, who wants to be able to have these children, concocts a plan with her son, Kronos, who, using a sickle, castrates Uranus, allowing the Titans to be born. We'll actually get into what happens with Uranus's castrated penis later when we talk about Aphrodite. because it factors into the creation of Aphrodite. But with these Titans finally being able to be born, we get the final of these heroic gamoi between Kronos and Rhea. Kronos, too, are also obsessed with the ability of the younger generation to overthrow his power, attempts to make it so that his children will never be born. I should mention, often you have Kronos represented with the sickle in his hand, showing his power of overthrowing Uranus. So what, of course, does Kronos do? But he eats his children. Of course, that's the logical thing to do. Every time Rhea bears a child, Uranus has her deliver the child to him, and he swallows the child. As I'm sure if you've heard the story before, as I'm sure you know, the last of her children being Zeus, the youngest, she gives Kronos a rock instead of Zeus. Kronos swallows the rock, and she takes Zeus to be raised somewhere else. Zeus, once he's fully raised, comes back and frees his siblings, who are regurgitated in reverse order of their birth, until all 6 of the children of Rhea and Kronos emerge from Kronos's belly. They form sides, and Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus, the 6 sons of Kronos and Rhea, convince the Cyclopes, the Hecatoncheires, Themis, who is one of the Titans, and Prometheus to fight on their side, and the Titans with Atlas, who is Prometheus's brother, fight on the sides of the Titans. This great war is known as the Titanomachy, the Titanomachy or the Titanomachy. So remember, the Cyclopes are the ones that help create Zeus's thunder and lightning bolts. So here from the Theogony, we have this. Then Zeus no longer held back his strength, but at once his breast was filled with strength, and he manifested his full force. He strode at the same time from the sky and from Olympus, relentlessly hurling lightning bolts. And the thunderbolts, driving forward a sacred flame, flew densely packed together with the thunder and lightning all at once from his massive hand. All around, the life-giving earth roared as it burned, and all around the great, immense forest crackled. The whole earth boiled, and the streams of ocean and the barren sea. The hot blast encompassed the earthly Titans, and an immense blaze reached the divine ether, and the brilliant gleam of the lightning bolt and flash blinded their eyes, powerful though they were. A prodigious conflagration took possession of chasm, and to look upon it with eyes and to hear its sound with ears, it seemed just as when earth and broad sky approached from above. Zeus Much just like Kronos was more powerful than Uranus, Zeus is more powerful than Kronos and is able to defeat him. Again, this idea of every new generation being more powerful than the next, the ability of the new generation to overthrow the next. As a result, Zeus and the Olympians, of course, win, and the Titans are sent to Tartarus, which is also one of the Titans, but they're sent into this place in the depths of the earth, unable to escape. Atlas, for his part, is given the eternal punishment of having to hold the sky or the earth on his shoulders for eternity. Gaia, not pleased with Zeus and the Olympians overthrowing the Titans, attempts to overthrow Zeus and the other Olympians. She basically creates this new being, Typhoeus, who technically is of this new generation, theoretically should be more powerful and should be able to be successful in his attempt to overthrow Zeus. But alas, what happens? So, I should mention, this is called the Gigantomachy, the giants. But when Zeus had driven the Titans from the sky, huge Earth bore as her youngest son Typhoeus, in love with Tartarus because of golden Aphrodite. His hands are holding deeds upon strength and tireless, the strong god's feet. And from his shoulders there were 100 heads of a snake, terrible dragons, licking with their dark tongues. And on his prodigious forehead fire sparkled in his eyes, under his eyebrows, and from all his head fire burned as he glared. So we have a representation of Typhoeus here in this image on the right, with his serpent legs and these wings. Although the younger generation should theoretically be able to overpower Zeus, Zeus's thunder and lightning bolts make him so powerful, combined, of course, with the help of the other Olympians, and the Gigantomachy doesn't stand a chance. And this is Gaia's last sort of attempt to overthrow the previous generation. She convinces Kronos to castrate Uranus. She sides with the Titans. And yet here we have this younger generation failing to overthrow Zeus and the Olympians. And we'll get into that. We don't see the Olympians overthrown. The cycle seems to end with Zeus in this third generation. But that's not to say the possibility doesn't exist. And again, we'll talk about that later. So I just wanted to show you, and we're going to sort of conclude with this, with the Pergamum altar, which is in modern day Berlin, the Pergamene Museum there in Berlin. This is an altar to Zeus, and German archaeologists basically disassembled this in pieces and brought it to Berlin and reset it up in Berlin. seeing the people there should give you an idea of scale. And what this has is it has the depiction of the gigantomachy on its face. What's so interesting about this, of course, is that this marble is in high relief. You really interact with it as you sort of approach it, to the point where even there are snakes that come out on the stairs. It's very cool. But we have these Olympians fighting a number of these earth creatures, represented by snakes, right, emerging from the earth. So here we have Porphyrion. We have Zeus, of course, with his lightning bolt and his eagle helping as he fights. Porphyrion, who I should mention, I didn't really talk about him. So he's one of these offsprings of Gaia, who also was born from the blood when Uranus was castrated by Kronos. So according to Hesiod, he attacks Heracles and Hera, but it's Zeus is basically able to kill him, to strike him with his thunderbolts. Heracles helps him kill him with an arrow. Actually, the Pindar actually calls Porphyrion the king of the giants. And it's actually, he's slain by Apollo, according to Pindar. Then we have Athena and Nike against Gaia. What's so interesting about this representation of Gaia is that we actually have Gaia, who's here on the bottom right, emerging from the earth to stop Athena. And Nike Athena is fighting, and you don't need to remember this name, Alcyones, who's one of these giants. But it's really, the important thing for this one is the physical manifestation of Gaia, which we don't find in many representations in ancient art. We only have this like sort of top half of her emerging from the earth. Lastly, here we have Oceanus. Here on the altar, we have Oceanus, who is of course one of these primordial beings. I don't remember who he's fighting. But that's okay. I still wanted to show you this version of Oceanus. All right, so that actually will conclude the discussion here of the Titans. So what's the important takeaway from this? And I hate to say that I sort of rushed through this, but really the important thing to understand about the Titans, the Titanomachy, the Gigantomachy, this progression from the primordial beings to the Titans to the Olympians is really about this progression of generations and the idea that each generation grows stronger than the next. This tells us a lot about the Greeks and how they view parentage, how they view their children, the idea that, I mean, if we think about even this concept in the United States today, right? You hear parents all the time, I made sacrifices, I worked hard, so you could have it a little easier. Parents want their children to be better. And so we see that manifested in this. The idea that the next generation should be better than the previous generation, more powerful, more capable, all of those things. It's like I said, we see this manifested in these stories, but we also see just a telling of how the world came to be, how these naturally occurring phenomenon came to be. It's a way of explaining the physical world when there's no explanation. Why does thunder and lightning happen? You know, why? How does childbirth happen? You know, all of these things in the ancient world. While eventually science, as we know it, will come into being, these early myths don't have that knowledge. And so it informs us of that worldview. And with that, I'm going to conclude this discussion of the Titans. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I hope that you have a great week, and I will catch you next time.